I believed I was not smart. I believed that creative people were everyone but me. I believe that actually my wife now of 20 years was way out of my league. If I could impact 10 people in my life, and those 10 people could impact 10 people, and those 10 could impact 10, I could impact 1,000 people. Is actually one of the most creative people that I know, a world-class communicator, national faith leader who has led us.
God has always seen you. And the success of this moment said he saw it and you believed it. And now you're going to help other people see it too. That's beautiful. That will change the world.
Well, welcome to the very first episode, the inaugural episode.
It's amazing. It's an honor to be here.
I love this, of a brand new show called Help Me See. And this is a brand new show all about possibility. And I love that. It's all about a community that we're hoping to build that is designed to challenge limiting belief systems, to tell stories around people who see possibility and to push past the familiar and hopefully unlock really just a world of possibility for people and people that are engaged with this. So I'm so excited because today I've invited my really good friend, Bill, and Bill Markham, who I wrote down a couple accolades for you. So I don't want you to talk just yet because I got a few things I want to say about you. Bill is actually one of the most creative people that I know, and a world-class communicator. The way his mind thinks, we're going to talk a little bit about today as well. National faith leader who has led us, over the last, 15 years, even into this building project. Over 24 years here at this church. You've had a run-in with Jesus that was different than anybody I'd ever kind of experienced and met before. So I want to talk a little bit about that today. But the reason I wanted to invite you is because you actually really marked a significant shift for me 25 years ago when I met you. And for me, this show actually kind of represents the next 25 for me in a lot of ways, because when I met you, I had every limiting belief system you could name. Actually, if you remember, you were my first prof in British Columbia. And I was thinking about it today in our staff meeting, actually, that I nearly flunked that year. I believed I was not smart. I believed that creative people were everyone but me. And I believe that actually my wife now of 20 years was way out of my league. That still probably is true. But I believed every limiting mindset around faith. I didn't think I fit in the faith. And not to mention a faith leader. I didn't think that was me. And I never thought I would actually be able to work with you because I thought you were incredibly creative. And so for you, when we first met, you sat down with me every 2 weeks and you began to speak into my soul. And you began to call things out of me that I had never had anybody ever see in my life. And it shaped me in such a significant way. And I thought in our classes together, you used to talk about this one thing. You said, if I could impact 10 people in my life, and those 10 people could impact 10 people. And those 10 could impact 10. I could impact 1,000 people. And then my life will have been worth it. And as you talked about that, I remember you said in one class, you said that most of you will hear this and that won't mean anything to you. But maybe one of you would. And I had this thought that maybe I could be one of the ones that could be impacted in such a way that I could impact 10 people. And it shaped that next 25 years for me up to this point. And so it's such a privilege to work with you, to be your friend. And I don't get a chance to sing your praises or give you those accolades, but I wanted to just start this episode by kind of bringing it back to why I started this was because of you. And I know you're going on holidays in a couple days, and I know you're tired and you fit this in. You didn't have to, but I just want to honor you because you've meant so much to me and you've totally shifted the way I think about my life. So thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, it's an honor.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yep. So I want to talk about you because, man, you are incredible. And I want to talk about maybe even if we take it back to the beginning a little bit, talk to me a little bit about just your mindset. Have you always had this capacity to see what's possible? And what did it kind of look like, you in high school graduating? Like, what was it that shaped that for you, as a young person? How did you develop that?
Oh, it's a really good question. I think we all have inherited mindsets. Sorry, yeah. You got me. It's just an honor to be in this moment with you. But we all have these inherited mindsets, and some of them are environmental. Yeah. Like sometimes we grow up in a home that criticizes everything, and so you're just trained. Your mind is trained to just see the negative in everything. Or maybe naively optimistic. You see the good to a fault in everything, or limited. You're always told, you're not good enough. And so we all have these environmental mindsets that we aren't even aware that they are there. We actually think that that's normal. And then we also have experiential mindsets. And these are things that our own failures, our own setbacks. And so for me, I grew up in my own environmental mindsets. We call them confirmation bias. Yeah. But I also had a lot of painful experiences. So even though I loved my life, we moved a lot and I didn't have a lot of friends. And I always have been different. Right. Like I've always, like you said that, and maybe that's why we connected, because I have never really felt like I fit either. And the way I thought about the world was always different. And I was always curious. So the mindset that unlocked it for me was my curiosity and my insatiable desire for discovering what could be. Yeah. And I always had that. I was always a curious kid. So, and I hate, and I'm using that word intentionally, I hate pat answers or just box cookie cutter. This is the way it is. This is what you have to accept. And I never fit that. So when I met Jesus, and honestly, not to over spiritualize it, but that was the transformed. I actually believed this narrative in the Bible that there was a God who loved me just the way I was, who made me the way I was, and actually wanted to do something. And I remember probably the biggest breakthrough was when I just said, okay, God, I'm in. I'll do it. Yeah. And then it was that awareness. I think that's when it says in the Bible with Adam and Eve, their eyes were opened. I think that's that moment. Now for them, they became aware of their limitation. Yeah. And I did too. But I also became aware of that moment of God's presence. And so for me, it's been years of shedding mindsets and replacing them with God's mindset. Yeah. And so, some people would say, oh, it's just natural for you. No, it's not. Right. Like, me well enough to know that I get discouraged easily, because it's like I just give my everything to people and people rip your heart out, and they do, and they don't understand, and they accuse you of all kinds of ulterior motives. And you're like, what? Yeah. And you have to constantly shed those mindsets. Yeah. So a big one for me growing up was that you'll never be good enough. You're not good enough. Yeah. And so the problem with a broken inherited mindset is you begin to behave in broken ways in response to that. Right. So for me, it was like, oh, I'm going to prove you wrong. Yeah. Like, you want to motivate me? You tell me I can't do something. Yeah. And I'm going to show you I can. And to some degree, there can be positive to that. Yeah. But the negative was that I was achieving to prove something to you instead of just resting in who God made me to be. Yeah. So everyone watching or listening to this will have inherited mindsets. And the greatest tragedy, though, is that they don't know it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's because that's what you know.
And they've accepted it as normal and normative, just like you accepted that lie.
Yeah. Well, and it was funny because as you're talking, that's what I was thinking about was there's these moments you become aware actually of something you've lived your whole life with that isn't true. And you begin to now question, like, what else actually do I think or believe? What mindset is like, what else? And I feel like I spent so many years now challenging, like, is that actually true, what I think,
Well, and the greatest tragedy, though, is that very few of us are willing to take responsibility. So what we do is we don't like our outcomes. We don't accept that actually it's because of our perspective. Yeah. It's our mindset that's actually creating some of these outcomes. And so then we spend our whole life trying to change the whole world. That's what religion is. I'm going to change you. I'm going to change this. I'm going to blame you. I'm going to blame that. But if you could actually just take responsibility, acknowledge and become aware, actually, I have some broken mindsets. I don't even know they're there. I need help to find those. Yeah. But if I could break those, it's not outside of me that's the problem. It's inside of me. Right. And that's the transformative work of Christ. The external world is not going to necessarily change. Yeah. It didn't for Jesus. No. But he changed inside. He had something deep inside of him. He had a mindset that your will be done. Yeah. Like even at the cross, like that's to me the most powerful proof that mindset transforms eternity. Yeah. He's in the Garden of Gethsemane. He says, I don't want this. Yeah. Let this cup pass, but not my will. His perspective is, okay, but you changed my mind on this, and your will be done. Yeah. And as a result, eternity is won. So I think that's good. That's the power.
Yeah. Can you talk about something that I feel like it's worth diving into for a minute? You talked about feeling like you didn't fit ever. Which is interesting because in some ways that's also your greatest gift that you don't like when people talk about living outside the or get, being outside of the box creatively. I feel like you don't even, that doesn't even make sense to you because you're like, I don't live in a box. Like I've always thought outside of the box. Can you just like, can you speak to that? Like, what is that? Have you always felt like that? And how have you navigated, like, especially in a church world where the box is, people like the box. They like that, like very clean, tidy. Like, how have you learned to live inside of that and thrive inside of that? Because especially with the expectations and everything.
Yeah, I don't know if I always thrive in it. I've always been a dreamer.
Yeah.
It's why I love what I do. I love coaching because I actually believe.
Yeah.
And I don't know where this came from.
Yeah.
But I actually believe all things are possible.
Right.
Like
why do you believe that?
I think, well, partly because I'm inspired by scripture and who God is. And I see, from when I was a kid, I love the Bible stories.
Yeah.
And again, for me, it was never because I literally thought they happened, whether they did or not is not the issue. They projected that all things are possible,
Right.
that a giant can be killed with a stone.
Right.
A wall can fall down. A lion's mouth can be shut. And I believed it.
Yeah.
And so for me, I just believe that about people. I believe that about my life.
Yeah.
And I believe this so far that I am convinced that if our mind could think it, it can be.
It can be.
And how do I know that? Well, because if you just look at history, what was science fiction is now reality.
Right.
Like even just 50 years ago.
Yeah.
So I think maybe I'm naturally potentially wired to be a dreamer.
Yeah.
But I also I don't know. I'm a fighter.
Yeah.
I refuse to accept
Yeah.
what is. I just refuse
Right.
it. To me, I don't understand why people would be willing to accept limitation. Because it's because you don't believe.
Yeah.
Even many Christians don't believe.
Yeah.
Like you either believe God can make all things possible, is working for your good. You either believe that or you don't. So maybe it was that. And I've always had a very close connection to God. I don't know how to explain it. And it's different than what most people explain to me.
Right.
I don't necessarily identify with that.
Yeah.
But to me, it's close, it's intimate, and
Right. So for you, a lot of it's rooted in what Jesus has unlocked in you. Like a lot of how you see the world or the possibility comes from that.
Well, yeah. And I've always loved history.
Yeah.
And I've seen it in other people.
Right.
So this is my thought.
Yeah.
If God can use that person or God can do that in them, he's got to be able to do that in me. Right. So maybe, and I always describe myself, this because you hear me talk all the time, but I describe myself a little bit as a naive optimist in the sense it's not naive.
Yeah.
It's rooted in God's character. Yeah. It's rooted in the evidence of normal people like you and I, who God has been able to do incredible things. Yeah. And it's also rooted actually in letting go of the results.
Right.
This is this is where a lot of people get hung up on the mindset because their mindset is locked into the result rather than into the behavior. Right. It doesn't matter to me. Like I never thought, one day I'm going to have this big church and one day I'm going to do, it was like, no, just what could I unlock in someone else? And what can God,
the next thing that could be possible.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. That's interesting. Cause I mean, you could even translate it a little bit to, you as leader. So maybe we could talk about that. So, somebody who's led us into this space. So this is, an incredible, doesn't make sense for our region kind of facility that you and your leadership led us to this over $20 million project that, again, people in Niagara, this is not a thing that we would normally have done, right? And yet somehow you believe that could be possible, even when I know, because I was with you, so many of the obstacles and the permit things and the things that came up in the last minute, like those are some of the things I know we still can't even talk about. But like, when nobody else could see it, when you were alone at home and questioning, was this even the right move? And should we have done this? What was that like? And how did you kind of get yourself through that? Like to not just quit sometime. Like there was so many times that I felt like with COVID, there was every reason for this not to work. Yeah. Even the day before, remember when we came in for that Easter Sunday? Yeah. I don't even know if you're supposed to be in the building at that point.
I don't know if we were either. But
no one's told me if we're supposed to be here or not. I am questioning if we were supposed to be. Anyhow, we made it, and but talk to me about that maybe dark night, or how did you navigate that?
Actually, you've unlocked an idea for me that I do believe, and I've never maybe even expressed till right now, which is kind of cool. I actually believe that it's compound faith.
Mm.
And what I mean by that is I could never have believed that what was possible today. I couldn't have believed that
Right.
30 years ago.
Yeah.
And for me, it started with really little things. So I tell you that,
Okay.
remember that story I tell about, well, I really want to hear God's voice. And we're at this conference and this
Yep.
guy talks about, if you want to hear God's voice, you got to courageously do it. And,
Right.
and I pray, God, show me your voice. And I think I hear green.
Right.
It's like weird, but I'm like, okay. So I go up to this big speaker and I go, hey, I think God has a word, and he's fired up. And I say green. And does that mean anything to you? And he's like, no.
Yeah.
And I remember being so crushed by that. So I went back to my seat, and in that moment, literally, God said, okay, now that I know I can trust you with that, I'm going to give you something. And that was the first time I heard what I would call like a spiritual download.
Yeah.
I knew something that I could not know in the natural for someone else. And it was a breakthrough. And so what I did is I began to build on those.
Right.
And I didn't always get it right, but I learned to trust in God's character. I learned to trust in God's voice, and I learned to trust in my ability by his Spirit to hear and to do it. So it's compound. And so for a lot of people, they think, where I've gotten, it's crazy. It is. It's a miracle.
Yeah.
It's impossible in the natural. But I couldn't have done that without the compound interest of faith. So
And that's what sustained you in that.
and I see this in all kinds of leaders.
Right.
They've never even taken that first step. They've allowed the limited mindset to keep them trapped in step one. And the other thing about me too is I always have a preferred future, but it doesn't always happen exactly that way. It's just, for me, it's more about a direction.
Right. Yeah.
So-
you hold pretty loosely to outcomes.
I do. I
Like
really.
you always have a picture, but you're kind of okay with, well, it wasn't quite right. It shifted to this. Okay, no problem. Well, then now it's this. But still the core concept or the direction you're still headed towards.
Yeah, because I think, I honestly believe God is responsible for the outcomes.
Right.
There's a lot of pressure, and the one pressure is that I'm the savior. It's on me as leaders. We carry that, and that is a curse.
Right.
Because that's why you burn out.
Yeah.
It's why you get into destructive behaviors to escape. It's everything. But when you really believe, God, you're the results are yours. I honestly believe this. If I were to be fired tomorrow, which is possible, I don't know, I'd be okay.
Yeah.
Because I'm doing what I'm supposed to do today.
Right.
I'm supposed to be right here, right now, doing this.
Yeah.
So, I think it's having a preferred future, but just doing the next right thing. And it could be simple things like, I was not very grateful as a person.
Yep.
And as soon as I was aware of that, I said, okay, you know what? I'm going to actually say thank you for everything. And it got kind of ridiculous at some point, but I had to consistently do that to break years. So I think of it, you know me, I talk about neuron, alignment. And every time you have a thought or an idea, a neuron synapses, a highway, a road is created.
Right.
And the more you drive down that road, it becomes a super highway. So for many of us, our limited mindset is like the 401 here in Ontario. It's like 8 lanes, 16 lanes of crazy going one way. Yeah. And you think that is going to change instantly. It's kind of like a guy running out with a little red flag trying to stop traffic. You're going to get run over. Yeah. So what you have to do is slowly, you have to create a new path. Right. You create another way, and you build that. So you say no to this mindset, and you say yes to this mindset. So every time I have doubt or fear, I have to actually say, no, that's not going to happen. Yeah.
You say that phrase, redock your neurons.
Redock. I said that all the time with my kids. Right. Redock your neurons, which means you're letting your mindset master you right now.
That's good.
But you are not a victim. And if you believe you're a victim, you will never change. Right. So this is where the idea of being overcomer Christ. So redock your neurons means, okay, take that thought captive and allow God to transform it into another thought. Yeah. So critics in my life, and I have lots of critics.
Yes, you do.
They criticize me, and I used to see them as the enemy.
Right.
Now I see them as a friend.
Yeah.
Whether their motivation is pure or not. Right. I go, okay, let me hear what you're saying, and I'm going to redock my neuron to go, okay, what could God be saying through you? What maybe do I need to change? Yeah. And we had a meeting last night, and there was a tense moment because someone, I could tell they did feel like they were being heard. And so they just kept talking louder and louder and more aggressive. Yeah. And I finally said, I hear you.
Yeah.
I see you. And in that statement, I was able to help them redock their neuron. Okay, I am heard.
Yeah.
See, because once you become aware of the limitation, then you can allow, with God's help, a transformation into something else. So even when I was a kid, like when my kids were really little, it was, and if you're a parent, you'll understand this. I would get angry because they're crying.
Right.
Well, they're not trying to ruin your life. They're sad about something. Yeah. So redock your neuron and stop thinking about yourself and start thinking about them. And so when you create, and then you create these new pathways to now where people go, man, your faith is like crazy. Right. It's like, well, yes, because I've allowed God compound faith to build this superhighway where if God told me to do this, I would believe it would be possible. Yeah. So we look at the result. Yeah. And everyone goes, well, how did you get the result? Yeah. Stop asking that question. Right. It's the wrong question. Yeah. What mindsets did you have? Yeah. And what right actions did you do in response to those mindsets that did end up with this result?
It's interesting. You just said something too that made me think. That person that you were in that meeting with, when you looked at them and said, I see you. The power of that, because you did that for me and it unlocked something in me. I'm curious, has anyone ever done that for you?
Well,
like other than obviously God, that's the biggest one. But like, did you have someone that?
In smaller ways, yes, absolutely. It's funny because if you know me, I love coaching volleyball. Yeah. And the reason is because when I moved back to Canada, I didn't fit in. I didn't dress the right way. I didn't know about brands, and I didn't watch movies growing up, so I didn't know any movies. I didn't know any music. Yeah. I wasn't allowed to listen to it anyway. So there was no neuron connection with anybody. Yeah. So I went to try out for volleyball because I thought, well, maybe I'll try that. And I was terrible. And I was by far probably one of the worst kids in the gym. Yeah. But I was determined and I was like literally bleeding, literally. Yeah. And so the coach came up to me and said, man, you really want to be on this team? And I said, yeah. And he said, well, I'm going to put you on. It was the first time that someone picked me.
Interesting.
Picked me and said, yeah. Yeah. So, and again, that empowered me to go, I want to do that for other athletes. Yeah. So I've coached for a long time at all levels. And but yes, it was someone who, and he has no idea. Yeah. He has no idea. But for just a moment, right, someone saw me and it wasn't even that I was good. He just saw a heart. Yeah. And man, when you see that, I think it's what motivates me to lead. Yeah. It's like for some reason, I see people's heart. Right. Can't explain it to you.
You do that different than anybody I've ever met.
I don't see the brokenness. Right. I mean, I do. Yeah. And it hurts. It's why I cry all the time. Yeah. It's like people make fun of me, but it's like, no, for a moment, I see you. Yeah. And you matter. Yeah. And maybe that's the greatest mindset that God gave me.
It's true.
That I mattered. Yeah. And I had loving parents. I had a great environment. It's just, it was just my own limitation. I think that we all have. And it's interesting because in the garden, Adam and Eve, the first thing they do is they hide. Right. Because that's what we do. Yeah. We hide and we're like, I'm worthless. And God says, where are you? Yeah. Not because he's mad. Because he's like, why are you hiding? Yeah. I created you for something so great.
It's incredible.
And even when he kicks them out of the garden, it's not because he's punishing them. Yeah. It's because he doesn't want them to live in that state for eternity. He's actually creating a neural pathway for something new. Right. They don't see it, but he does. And he covers them, right? I love the image. They're sewing these little fig leaves together. It's like hilarious. And he covers them because that's what God does. And so what you think is disappointment or failure or limitation, maybe you're hiding in your shame or you're living in blame, and you've allowed these mindsets to become super neural pathways. It can never happen for me. All these lies, God wants to actually shut you out of that, cut you off from that.
Close your eyes.
And and open to something new. And I've just lived my life that way.
Yeah, like it's funny because I feel that in this moment too, like that's I never thought about, I've thought about possibility a lot, but I haven't thought about the power of when somebody sees you. And it's scary because you don't want to be seen. I think maybe that's for a lot of us. We feel it's not safe to be seen. But to be like, when you saw me, you saw my soul. I don't know. It was very bizarre. I think very unnerving when I first met you in your office. And we had these mentorship sessions every couple of weeks. But to be seen at the deepest level and to have somebody call that out of you, that is probably one of the most beautiful things that is on this side of heaven, to have somebody to be seen. And I think that's what God actually does for us, which is he sees us and he accepts us and he calls us up. And to me, that baseline of what this is all about is at the foundation of that for me, which is that, yeah, when you allow God to see you and to call you for all the things that you have going against you and all the things you built up, but to call out the best in you is to really walk in the most amount of possibility, I think,
Well, but this is the most amazing part of me. We celebrate Christmas and Easter and we miss it.
Yeah.
It's actually really simple. God saw you.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, I know you can't see me, so I'm going to show up so you can.
Mm-hmm.
And I want you to know I see you. And this is, I think, was what's so beautiful about Jesus.
Yeah.
He doesn't see a woman in adultery. Yeah. He sees a broken woman who needs someone to say, I'm going to fight for you.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah.
And he did that for me.
Mm-hmm.
And he wants to do that for you.
Yeah.
He wants to do that for you. It's and if you could just if you could just say, God, help me see that, that would change everything.
Yeah.
So
that's amazing.
Yeah, God, that's what Christmas and Easter is about.
Mm-hmm.
I see you.
Yeah.
And even on the cross, I see your nakedness. I see your shame. I see your embarrassment. I see your rejection. I see your failure. I see it all.
Mm-hmm.
But don't let it limit you. Because this will rise.
Yeah.
Something new will rise.
Yeah.
And I just believe that.
Yeah. That's cool. Okay. Well, that's a lot of heart stuff. Let's talk I want to talk about you as
oh man.
I want to talk about you as a creative. Because you are one of the best communicators I've ever met, which is so cool. Like your ability to, in the moment, to, like you said, see people. It's like you feel a room, you see a room, which is funny because it's irritating as we prep for stuff because you're like, I don't know. Until I get out there, I'm not sure what I'm going to talk about or feel. But I want to learn a little bit for a second, like what's happening inside your mind that, like, when you see, maybe as you're prepping, as you're on stage, as you're communicating, we've been talking about lately some of this language around frequencies. Like you're jumping between professor to healer, and you're motivating people. You're and you're jumping all over, and it's like you feel the frequencies of the room, and you're in it. And sometimes the notes were in the back going, I don't know what he's going to talk about, next. But can you just like let us into your mind for a minute? Like, what is it as a creative communicator? Like, what is it that you see? Maybe it's not words, maybe it's pictures. But what is it that you see when you're up there and you're communicating? Like, talk about what's happening.
Yeah, it's so interesting because I guess to articulate it is really powerful. And you're helping me actually in thinking about that, because we've been talking a lot on creative team about that.
Right.
I'm trying. I know we need creative 6 months. I know. But here's what it is. I believe that godly communication is actually a shared experience. I think most communicators think it is a one-way experience.
Interesting.
And it's a performance.
Right.
And it's a shared experience. So I thank you for your compliment. I don't always feel like I'm a great communicator. And I was trying to figure out why. And I'll tell you why. Often, I used to travel a lot and speak, and I don't really enjoy that as much.
You don't love that.
Because it's when I go into a hostile environment or a non-connected environment,
right,
it doesn't become a shared experience.
Right. They're judging you for your performance, or you don't know that.
Yeah, right. Or I can't connect. It can't be a shared experience because I don't really know
Got
you.
It. Yeah.
So I remember one of my greatest failures. I was at a big event, and I got thrust into a situation where a really high name speaker couldn't make it, so I got stepped in. I thought, okay, and it was awful. Everything about it was awful. Right. So I think, if you can approach it as a shared experience, and that goes from your prep all the way to the end. And that's why I always say to you, I don't know. Every Sunday, I have my notes, I have ideas, but I really don't know until I'm in the shared experience. And I actually believe this. God is speaking to us.
Right.
And not only is he speaking to me in that moment, this is going to sound really strange to some people, but he's speaking to me through the audience.
Interesting.
When they're attentive and they're hungry, there's a you talk about frequencies. I love that. It just amps up the frequency. It's like when I was growing up in Thailand, we had a shortwave radio.
Yeah.
And because we didn't have English radio. So you'd fidget with that dial.
Right.
And if you got it right on, man, it was crystal clear. Right. You could hear, but often it was like just a little distorted. So when I'm prepping, and it's funny because I don't even think I'm that creative. Although I appreciate it. I just really try to tap into God's heart. And he is the creator. Yeah. So maybe that's the creative piece, right? And when I'm prepping, I'm always thinking, okay, as I'm reading, first of all, speak to me. Right. I believe the Bible is not just a book, and it's not just a history book, religious books. It is those things, but it's actually a living, breathing book. Right. To read it properly, you actually interact with it. It breathes on you, and you breathe on it. And so as I'm reading, I'm like, show me. And it's why I can read the same thing like 100 times and get 100 things. But in that moment, I'm like, okay, God, but what does this mean for Justin? Right. What does this mean for Lauren? Right. What does this mean for Lyle? Yeah. I'm thinking through the people in that space.
You begin to see people.
What does this mean for the person who's going to be walking into our church for the very first time? And the reason we have that happen is because we see them.
Because we see them. Yeah.
We create it. It's not rocket science. Right. We don't do it to be gimmicky or to market or to build a mega church, although we get accused of all that stuff all the time. Yep. No, we don't do it. We do it because we see you and we think, okay, what are you going to be feeling? Yeah. So, so when you begin to step into that frequency and see what God sees, why did you tell this story? Yeah. And what does it mean for me? And so that's the prep part. Yeah. And then when I'm in the moment, I'm like,
you see who God sees.
I'm feeling it.
Right.
And I can't explain. It overwhelms me. Right. And I kind of feel a little embarrassed, honest, to be honest with you sometimes, and silly for crying all the time. Right. But now I'm not just hearing God. We're hearing God. That's the beauty. Right. That's when communication is supernatural.
Right. Which is why people, when they come, even for those that have been online for a while, or they come in person, they're like, well, what did I just experience?
What did I feel?
Yeah, because I felt the frequency of God. I felt this connection. I felt us together.
Yeah, so I don't.
That. Wow.
So I don't see my role as a communicator as instructing you on anything. It's why people get frustrated with me. Bill, you got to teach people, this and that. They want
Even though you do instruct.
Yeah, exactly.
Your role is not instructor.
They want me to fit into their box of experience.
Right.
And their own limited mindset.
Back to the mindset
God grew up and this God really moved in my heart this way, so it should be like that all the time. And I'm like, no, I won't. Yeah. Because I believe God does the work. Mm-hmm. My job is just to do my best to get us tuned in. Yeah. Not me and not you, us.
Interesting.
How do I create an environment and a space where we're actually hearing God together in that moment? Yeah. And man, I got a long way to go on this. But that to me is when it becomes supernatural.
Yeah.
Communication.
I don't think maybe it's not in my circle, but I don't know a lot of people who think about communication like that. And you're right. Like, I think there's something about when you shift from that, like, it's about me, it's about my performance, and you could see it not only as a gift for others, but now as a shared, like that's next level. I think that you've actually helped, because I'm speaking this Sunday, actually.
And you're going to be great.
That'll help me. But yeah, like, wow, that's a really neat way to think about it. This is a shared experience. And how can I facilitate that? How can I get out of the way of that? How can I see what God sees and see who God sees and tap into that? That's amazing.
Well, and it doesn't diminish the mechanism or the methods.
Yeah.
Like, you still have to be good at your craft, because the better you are at dialing in, and it just means that those aren't the end goal.
Right.
Like, I'm not trying to get you a bunch of information.
Got it.
But that information, if it's really good, can actually open your heart to God.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yep.
I'm not just telling you a story even though I love telling stories, especially emotive ones, just to get you crying.
Right.
I'm telling you that story to show you something about God, to get you connected to God. So those things are all important.
Right.
So I'm not minimizing those things. I'm just saying, seeing them for what they are. Because we've all heard sermons or messages or leadership lessons where it's a lot of really good information, but we forgot it.
Yeah.
Because it didn't tie us to God's heart.
Yes.
So you're right.
So you're saying the hands part, the craft part, the
prep,
the communication strategies, lean in, learn all of them, build on them, stack them, compound them, but don't miss the fact that they work with your heart. That's actually your hands and your heart.
Well, think about it this way. Work on getting the dial right, but just make sure you're on the right frequency.
Right. That's good.
Right? Yeah. So I work hard at my craft. I do.
Yeah.
I wish I had more time to spend on it, but I work really hard at it and I take it very seriously. Yeah. And before I go on stage, I always battle this lie in my head. You have nothing to say and this isn't going to make a difference. Every Sunday. It's so weird. I thought that would go away, but it doesn't. And so every Sunday I go, God, I'm going to step out there and you're going to have to fill my mouth. Yeah. I know what you're saying to me and I'm going to hope that connects. Yeah. But then again, so people are going to listen to this and they're going to be like, oh, you don't prep it. No, we take that part really seriously. And this is where you help me a lot too. It's like, okay, let's, what is God saying? So 6 months in advance, God is telling us, what is God saying to our church? And he gives us a verse to anchor in. We never speak without being anchored in truth. Yeah. It's got to come from that. Yeah. We're not talking about an idea and adding scripture to confirm our bias.
That's right.
We're actually anchored. And what does this mean to our church family? What do we want them as an outcome? Yeah. So whether it's get into a group, get connected, we're closer to Jesus. Yeah. So
cool.
Don't forget the mechanics of it.
Yeah.
But just don't let the mechanics become the master.
Right. Cool. I like that. Okay. I want to end today. I think for me, the most life transformational thing, and we've already talked a little bit about it, but my run-in with Jesus in his truest sense and you've had this too, has been the biggest catalyst for me that has propelled away every belief system that was wrong or limited, everything that I was afraid of. It's funny, I feel like I spent so many years even just testing it, and I'm still in it a little bit, but I'm a little more trusting in it now. But just keep saying, like, what else could be possible? And Jesus, for me, is the foundational piece of this, that I think the closer I get to him, the more I feel like everything is actually possible. That all these things I thought, like my dad's, he's the speaker. He was a pastor. I thought I do music. That's what I do. I don't speak. And it's interesting to challenge that, to go like, but why do I believe that? And is that actually true? And so there's this foundational component that Jesus has actually totally transformed for me. And I wasn't expecting to maybe go there as much today, but I do feel like I want to just land there, because I wish people could know how significant a relationship with Jesus in terms of what it releases inside of you. Like, I just see the world totally different. And I know this is the same for you. Like, maybe just talk a little bit about how different your perspective is. And maybe even has that grown? Has that changed? Has that, like, I know you like, I love that you talked about compounding, compound faith, but like how transformational has that been for you around just what you see, and maybe even for the next chapter of your life? What do you see Jesus like doing in you? Mm-hmm. Like you think of how much you've compounded to now, and this next, chapter of your life, like, what do you think he could do in the next iteration of what you have in the next few years,
Yeah, it's really interesting, because I think for a lot of us, we see Jesus transactionally. Mm-hmm. And I know people have heard this before, but we actually think, well, what can Jesus do for me?
Right.
He saves me, he heals me, he restores me. And those things are all true. And those can break mindsets. But the truth is, and it's going to sound Sunday schoolish, but if you could just accept that Jesus loves me. And where I've come to my life, really, at the end of the day, my success, what other people think of me or what I accomplished will mean really nothing. It'll be how well I loved. And the only way I can experience that is if he loves me. And so, you know me, I just love people. And even though I'm an introvert, that surprises people. And even though it's not natural for me, Jesus demonstrates what love really looks like. And until you're really, really willing to die for someone or someone's, you don't know that love. And so what I see in my future is whatever he gives me opportunity, whoever he gives me opportunity to love. Right. I know it's not like, you know, I talk about my grandkids all the time. People get sick and tired, but it's true. I look forward to the next generation of our church. The students right now who are in our program, who are becoming now our staff and our team. Like I just see the love of God in transforming everything. So to me, it's just, I believe these three things. You've heard me say it. I believe every human being was created to make the world a better place. Whoever's watching, wherever you're at, no matter what your limitation, no matter what your setback, environment, experience sets you back, you were created to make the world a better place. And that could be as simple as being the mother of the next great world leader, whatever, who's going to change the world for good, whatever it is. 2, love is the only thing that's going to do that. And people get sick of me talking about love, but it is the most powerful frequency. It's actually the only frequency. As a matter of fact, if I were to describe God, the thing that's changed for me is I've shed my Greek mythological view of God, and he's the frequency of love. God is love. And then Jesus is the best example, so I follow him. So what Jesus does for me is he shows me how to love myself and love him and love others, because that's what changes the world. So do I know exactly how that will change the world? I don't. Maybe it's one person, maybe it's 10 people, whatever that is. But I just know that he's teaching me, he's demonstrating, he's helping me see that he loves me, and that's all that matters. And now my life has to be committed to loving others. So simple, but really hard to do. But man, when you dial into that frequency, that's what changes the world. And I think in heaven, to be honest with you, there's gonna be a whole bunch of people we've never heard of. We never heard of, and they're going to be the heroes of faith because we think of the results. God sees the heart. So
that's beautiful.
I just want to be that.
I love that. Well, I think we're out of time. Thank you, man.
Thank you. It's an honor.
I want to say I love you a lot, and I appreciate you so much. Thank you for inspiring me to be who I am, and thank you for sharing just a little bit about your life. And I celebrate you. I'm looking forward to what God is going to do in you over the next number of years. And I like that because it's not really a direction. It's just, it's a direction. It's not an outcome. Result. It's not a result. And so I just, I speak that into your life. I believe in what you have led us to and who you are as a person, your family. We love you guys, and just cheering you on.
Well, and for me, I just want to honor you on your inaugural podcast. God has always seen you. And the success of this moment is that he saw it and you believed it. And now you're going to help other people see it too. That's beautiful. That will change the world.
Thanks.
Love you.
Love you too. Hey, thanks so much for watching. And if you like this video and want to see more like it, just hit that subscribe button, leave a comment, or you can follow me on Instagram at @Driedger. And if you have a question, or if there's someone you would like to be featured on the show, shoot me an email at hello@helpmesee.ca. And together, let's keep challenging limiting belief systems, choosing to see possibility, and pushing past the familiar. This is the Help Me See Show.
Delivers anything?
How are you?
Good.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Oh, man.
So far, so good.
Yeah? One thing to the next?
Yep. It literally is. I just didn't go to birthday because I honestly am not going to be home until whatever time tonight. Okay, so I wear just my black shirt.
Yeah, whatever you got.
Or
We're
I
on
wear-
beige here, so.
I wear that.